Hello, I'm Annie Graham Larkin, Executive Director of the Bisbee Mining and Historical Museum. Welcome to Historic U.S. Highway 80, the Broadway of America with Mike Anderson. Thank you to our members and donors who enable the museum to provide free online programming and fulfill the organization's mission to discover history, explore Bisbee's past today. To learn how you can assist the museum in supporting its mission and programs by becoming a member or donor, please visit bisbeemuseum.org. On Saturday, May 16th at 11 a.m., the museum will host the free online program From Mammoth Hunters to Agriculture, Pottery, and Trade, The Rich Archaeology of Southern Cochise County with Dr. Hunter M. Claypatch. To register or for more information, please visit the Bisbee Mining and Historical Museum's website or Facebook page. All right, now I'd like to introduce our speaker. Longtime Bisbee resident Mike Anderson is the author of Warren Ballpark, a work that delves into the rich history of the playing field. He is also the historian and founding member of Friends of the Warren Ballpark in Bisbee. In addition to Warren Ballpark, Anderson's historical research has been featured in numerous journals and articles. And if you would like to ask questions during the program today, please type your questions into the Q&A chat box. We'll gather those questions to share with our speaker after the presentation. Also, a link to the recording of today's program will be sent to all of our Zoom registrants later today. And with that, I'd like to welcome Mr. Mike Anderson.
Thank you very much, Annie, and thanks to everybody who's taking time off your schedule to participate in this talk today. 2026 marks the 100th anniversary of the creation of the modern numbered U.S. highway system. And one of those highways that was established in 1926 was U.S. Highway 80. Route 66 gets all the love, all the attention. And US Highway 66, which ran from Chicago to Los Angeles, certainly deserves its share of publicity and notoriety. And one of the reasons why we know about Highway 66, but we don't know much about 80 unless we live on it and drive it, is that Highway 66 was written about by John Steinbeck in his book, The Grapes of Wrath. It was the subject of a Bobby Troup song in 1944 called Route 66 and was sung by Nat King Cole. And was also the topic of a television series that was made in the late 50s and early 60s called Route 66 that ironically was almost never filmed on Route 66. But today we're going to talk about another highway that has tremendous historical and social significance and economic significance to our area, and that's Highway 80. So we'll look at its antecedents, how it was developed, and how it lost its prominence and lost it far earlier than most other numbered U.S. highways that lost their significance and importance when the interstate highway system was developed. So without further ado, let's drive into the past and take a brief glimpse at the future, hopefully, of historic Highway 80. This is a photo taken at the intersection of State Route 191 and State Route 80. And the reason I put it up here is that it shows the current U.S. historic highway sign that are now used to mark 80 in Arizona. So let's go back to the antecedents of transportation before 80 was developed. Early transportation across this part of the country was by stagecoach, and this is on the left is a wood carving of the overland mail, the Butterfield line that existed between Missouri and San Francisco in the 1850s. Travel on stagecoach was tedious, tiresome, and the average speed was somewhere between 3 and 5 miles per hour, depending on terrain and what kind of animals were used in conveyances. But 3 miles an hour is a good rule of thumb for travel by stagecoach. The advantage was that you could travel day and night, and this went between stages, between stations all the way across the western United States. The only time you got out of that stagecoach was to use the facilities, if there were, to eat if there was food, and stretch your legs periodically. Other than that, you stayed confined in that stagecoach for days and days and days. It took about 3 weeks to get out between San Francisco and western Missouri. That changed as steam locomotion became a standardized form of travel. And on the right, you can see the El Paso and Southwestern Depot in Douglas, and one of the EP&SW locomotives owned by Phelps Dodge. Travel by steam engine, and during the earliest days of the 20th century, from 1840s until the early 1900s, average speed was about 30 miles an hour. So you had a tenfold increase in speed with locomotion or locomotives. That's great. You're still confined to that network. So wherever the rail line goes, you could travel by train. It was also according by schedule. It was not spontaneous. And then automobiles developed in the 1890s, first in Europe and then in the United States. And on the left, you see one of the earliest automobiles. They were horseless carriages. They had a small gasoline engine that was connected with a chain and later a transmission. And the very first ones were essentially novelties and toys for very rich people to drive around for short distances at low speed in towns. And that's what existed up until about 1908, when Henry Ford came up with the idea of creating an automobile that was reliable, that could drive up to about 40 miles an hour or 45 with a good tailwind and going downhill, and that was available to almost anybody because it was cheap. The original price was about $800, and the price kept dropping as time went on. And this was the Model T. The Model T, which came out first in 1908, was a game changer. All of a sudden, Americans had access to reliable and inexpensive motor vehicles. So when you have transportation that goes 3 miles an hour, you don't need really good roads. You need a dirt path that's not too bad, that won't break a wagon wheel or an axle, and that's safe for animals to pull wagons, but you don't need a really good set of roads. But when the automobile came along and suddenly you could go 30 to 45 miles an hour, suddenly you need a better quality of road. And at this time in the United States, there were very, very few miles of paved road between communities. A lot of the bigger cities and even smaller cities, such as Bisbee, had paved streets, but they did not have paved roads in between. So now we see a need for a road system that is both able to carry motor vehicles and also can be maintained. And in these early days, and I've included New Mexico in this because the part of the historic Highway 80 that we're going to be looking at today goes from Rhodes Fork, New Mexico, down through Rodeo, across State Line Road, and then up to Benson in a big old horseshoe shape. So these are the roads in New Mexico and Arizona as existed. They were sandy, they were rutted, they had very few improvements to them, and during bad weather, they were even worse. So this was the state of road transportation in Arizona in the earliest days of the 20th century. And a lot of times cars would get stuck, or they would break an axle, or cause flat tires. It was difficult, uncertain travel between communities. And in the early part of the 20th century, the early 1900s, the territories of Arizona and New Mexico both created positions of state highway engineers. And the fellow on the left is James Durand. He was the territorial roads engineer for Arizona, and then became the state highway engineer for Arizona after 1912. His claim to fame was as a civil engineer. He developed his own company. And in 1907, he was appointed by the Warren Company of the Calumet and Arizona Mining Company to create the Warren Bisbee Street Railway system. So this was the man that had the contract to develop the the street railway in Bisbee. He was also responsible for creating the sewer and water lines for the new Warren town site. And his company still exists. It's called Johannesson and Duran these days, but it's still in existence today. The fellow on the right is James French, who was the first state highway engineer in New Mexico. These fellows had some very serious and formidable tasks, and that were also um, going to be difficult to achieve because of the vast distances between communities in the states of Arizona and New Mexico, and because they had limited resources to do it. But they took it on with a vengeance. They were superb civil engineers, both of them. And despite all the obstacles that they had to overcome, they were both able to create good systems of roads within a short period of time. And so these were the road systems that existed. And I'm going to point out this was the road that went from Lordsburg, New Mexico, down to Rodeo, across the state line, down to Douglas, up to Bisbee, Tombstone, and then across what is now Highway 83 to Sonoyta, and then up to Tucson. That was the original highway that went through southern Arizona. Notice there's nothing across the northern part of the state. There's a lot more rail line through Arizona at that time. So this doesn't show the Southern Pacific, of course, because it's not a road, it's a railroad. But notice that the El Paso and Southwestern Railroad system here was basically used as the same path that the first decent roads through southern Arizona were developed. And the same thing, and there's the road from New Mexico, and you can see it doesn't exactly line up completely, but it went down from Lordsburg and then down into Arizona through across State Line Road. There was a big push all over the United States, but it was particularly powerful in the western part of the United States because the distances were greater and it was going to take a lot more effort to create a good road network out here. The good roads associations developed all over the country. And in Arizona, there was a book published in 1913 that was basically a road guide for motorists to show them how to get from point A to point B through the entire state. And so these are pages from that Good Roads Association book that was printed in 1913. This shows, here's Bisbee, here's Douglas, and this shows the road that went up through Bisbee and then up to Tombstone, and they gave you specific landmarks where you could get gasoline, oil, and tires, and even showed photos of places that you could use as landmark guides and or also sold automobile products. This is High Lonesome Road right here. And of course, this is no longer a road that's used, and it's in pretty horrible shape. But at that time, it was a legitimate highway in Arizona or southern Arizona. And this is the road from Douglas that goes up and to Rodeo, New Mexico. The Good Roads Association used road races as a way to promote good roads in Arizona. And I thought this is particularly interesting because in 1913, there was a road race between El Paso and Phoenix that drew tremendous amount of media attention for the time, because this is the first time that cars really went fast on roads. And the average speed in this road race was about 30 miles an hour. And the reason why that was an average speed is because on good paved roads, these cars could get up to about 60 miles an hour or so. But on the dirt roads that existed between El Paso and through Columbus and through Animas and down to Douglas, the average speed or the speed dropped to 10, 15 miles an hour in certain places. This photo was taken by Phelps Dodge mining engineer Takeo Shikamura from what is now the parking lot in Lowell overlooking the pit. And where it says Bisbee Cafe on that, that's the present site of the Bisbee Breakfast Club. So Takeo Shikamura was out taking a picture of this car as it went around the racetrack, which was, at that time was Erie Street in Lowell. And in 1916, the federal government passed the Federal Aid Road Act. And this man here, Logan Page, was the director of the Bureau of Roads for the federal government. And this fellow on the right is John Bankhead, Alabama senator, Confederate War veteran, who was one of the staunchest advocates for a good system of paved roads all over the United States. So Logan Page was a civil engineer who was a passionate believer in developing a good road system. And when his physician told him he had a very serious heart condition that required him to leave work and get rid of the stress of what he was doing to promote good roads, he said, I would rather die doing what I'm doing than retire and do nothing. And in 1918, at a Good Roads Association conference in Chicago, he indeed died in the saddle. But this is probably the most important and significant person in terms of developing the federal road system, Logan Page. And John Bankhead was the man who was chiefly responsible for guiding legislation through Congress to develop the funding source for the U.S. highway system. Oh, and his daughter, for those of you who like classic movies, was Tallulah Bankhead, a film actress from the 30s, 40s, and 50s. After World War I, the Army decided they wanted to see how hard it would be to take motor transport across the United States. So they did a motor march with about 79 vehicles. It took them 2 months to go from the East Coast to the West Coast. They destroyed over 7 bridges excuse me. They destroyed about 70 bridges as they did it. And what this road march demonstrated was that it was very, very difficult to get the motor vehicles across the United States. One of the officers that went on this particular motor convoy was a young, I believe he was a major at that time, named Dwight David Eisenhower, who, after World War II ended and he took a tour of conquered Germany and their limited access high speed Autobahn system, realized this is what we need in the United States. But in 1919, we didn't have much in the way of good roads across the country. But as time went on, the state of New Mexico and the state of Arizona developed roads, and they used animals to originally pave roads, or not pave them, but create the roads. And then later on, they used machinery to develop roads. So as time went on, it became more efficient to develop more modern and safer and reliable road net in southern Arizona and southern New Mexico. And this was the original highway. Now, sure, I remember I just talked about John Bankhead. What he did and Congress did was to provide funding so that they could connect a bunch of roads that were basically just bits and pieces together across the southern United States. So in doing so, this became the Bankhead Highway, and they were signed by yellow and white signs that had BH inside on the signage. And this highway went from Richmond, Virginia, across the southern states, and then it split off and went several different directions, but the southern route became what would later become Highway 80. And this is the southern alignment of the Bankhead Highway. And this was about 1920 when this happened. So we're not at the stage yet where we have numbered, rational, consistent system of highways, but they were able to find enough paved and graveled, reliable road segments that they could put them together into a network and sign it as the Bankhead Highway. So this is one of the very first examples of a signed road net in the United States. And in 1920, Cochise County developed its own paved highway. This is one of the first 2 paved highways across Arizona. The other was a segment up by Roosevelt Lake. But this was the very first paved highway and this is linking 2 cities in southern Arizona. And this was developed in 1920, and it was a concrete road network. And these were photos that appeared in the Bisbee Daily Review showing the progress. Culverts. So this was designed by highway engineers as an all-weather hard surfaced road, which was a novelty in Arizona at the time. So this is going to make highway travel faster, safer, and all weather. And it was made out of concrete. And here is the highway as it exists today. It's still out there. This piece right here with Mrs. Anderson walking on it is over, if you drive into the entrance for the Cochise County Jail on 80 to the east of the traffic circle, just drive in the immediate entrance to the Cochise County Jail and look to your right and left, and you will see this on both sides of the road. This is the original concrete bankhead highway that was abandoned after it proved to be unsafe for post Model T automobiles. This is another segment of that same road, the Bankhead Highway, as you go into the Warren cutoff from Highway 80, and you look to your right, you will see this segment of the same highway. So there's discontinued pieces of the original 1920 road still, and there's quite a few of them. There's a lot more than this. These are just two of the best that we were able to photograph. These segments that exist between the traffic circle and Grace's Corner. And after 1920, construction started north. So this was originally part concrete, but mostly oiled. So oiling a dirt gravel road, what that does is keep the dust down. And this became the highway between Tombstone and Bisbee. It wasn't concrete, but it had bridges and culverts, so it could be used for all weather. And this shows going up the divide. Cars travel here 30 miles an hour in safety. That's quite an improvement. In 1925, a magazine that advocated for good roads was first published in Arizona. It was called Arizona Highways, and it was run by the Transportation Department, or the Roads Department that day, Highway Department. So this is volume 1, number 1 of Arizona Highways magazine. This shows the road network as it existed at the time, and there it is. This is the Bisbee, or the highway between Road Forks down to Rodeo and then up to Tucson. And there was no paved highway. This was gravel, or this was dirt, actually, very bad, poorly constructed roadway up here. This was not usable for automobiles at the time. In 1926, or actually in 1925, the American Association of Highway Engineers got together and decided we want to create a rational road network all over the United States. So we're going to number the highways, and we're going to find the best roads, county roads, state roads, the roads that can be safely used by motorists, and we're going to turn those into a highway system. So in 1926, November 1926, US Highway 80 became part of the entire network of highways that traverse the United States. And just like for interstate highways today, the US highway system in 1926 had north-south roads with odd numbers, so 1 through whatever, and roads going east and west were even numbered. So Highway 80, even though it goes north and south in certain places, it generally went east and west, so it became an even numbered road. And here's Highway 80 as it existed in 1926, coming up from the south to El Paso, and then across New Mexico, Lordsburg, down to what is today Road Forks, and then down to Douglas, up through Bisbee and Tombstone to Benson, and then using what was called the Benson Highway to Tucson, going north through Florence Junction, and then across to the state line where the Colorado River is, and then to San Diego. One of the original names of the US 80, and again, all these highways had different names. They were very confusing. It was the Overland Road. It was the Borderlands Highway. It was the Dixie Highway. and it was the Bankhead Highway. Well, now it's going to be Highway 80, and it started in Savannah, Georgia, Columbus, Georgia, across the Alabama River, Selma, Montgomery, Meridian, Mississippi, Jackson, Mississippi, Vicksburg, over to Shreveport, Louisiana, Dallas, Fort Worth, down to El Paso, and then down to Douglas, and then over to up through Tucson and Phoenix, across to San Diego. Its eastern end was in Savannah, Georgia, a beautiful city. If you haven't had the chance to go to Savannah, Georgia, do it. It is absolutely gorgeous. I would recommend that you do it during winter months because it's tropical. The heat and humidity are so high. You get off an airplane and go outside the terminal, your glasses will steam up. Beautiful city, though, absolutely gorgeous. And the western terminus was San Diego, California. These are contemporary photos of when the highway was running in its early days. So these are the two terminuses for US Highway 80. Now, as car technology developed and we went from Model Ts to Model As, they got faster. And we started getting even faster cars, such as this Packard here that could do 75 miles an hour without breathing hard. The original highways are no longer safe. The curves are too tight. There's not enough space on the road, not enough shoulder. Accidents were common, no seat belts or airbags, so the fatality rate for road accidents was much higher. So we see a big change in highway construction techniques as civil engineers recognized a need to make safer highways to accommodate faster automobiles. And we see after the 1925 meeting and the 1926 U.S. highway system being developed, there was also a standardized system of highway signs. Before that, it was confusing as all get out. People basically got lost because they couldn't read the road signs or understand what they meant. But now we have a standardized system of highways. One of the standard road symbols was the shield used for United States U.S. highways. So we see that where it says State 88 is an example. We also see different kinds of signs. Speed limit signs were standardized, and information signs were standardized. This is a picture taken where the traffic circle is today. This is where the Dunlap service station or service center is on the traffic circle. Right across over here was Ryan's Service Center. You can see the Campbell shaft right there. And on the telephone pole, or in front of the telephone pole, are all the signs for the various places, the directions and places of interest to go to. And these are standardized road symbols or road signs. So automobiles and good roads suddenly made automobile tourism possible. And we start seeing people coming out in larger and larger numbers to come to Southeast Arizona. And one of the places that they went to visit that was developing its own interesting history was Tombstone. And the state of Arizona and New Mexico both started promoting highway tourism. And as highway tourism was promoted and more cars were traveling on these better roads, then we also start seeing infrastructure developing as a result. And motels and gas stations sprang up all along Highway 80. This is the Pueblo Court going up West Boulevard, Upper Tombstone Canyon. This was a Hidalgo service station located in Lordsburg, New Mexico. And you start seeing this kind of infrastructure all along Highway 80. What would truly be interesting to see 100 years ago and 80 years ago would be the number of service stations between Lordsburg, New Mexico and Douglas, and also going up towards Bisbee at Grace's Corner and other locations. You'd see infrastructure that doesn't exist anymore. You'd also see businesses that don't exist anymore alongside there, like roadside cafes. And this, of course, this is the Pueblo Courts, and this is now just regular rentals. But in those days, it was a motor court, the precursor of the modern motel, or what we call motels today. And this is a tourist court down in Douglas. And there are a number of pieces of abandoned tourist courts or tourist courts repurposed still along Highway 80. This is 4th Street in Benson. So this is 80 going through Benson in about 1940. 80 entered Arizona at the 109th Meridian State Line Road, where and this is the Rodeo Cafe and grocery store in Rodeo, New Mexico. This is a piece of the New Mexico segment of Highway 80. And 80 followed the railroad line. Remember the El Paso and Southwestern Railroad, those railroad engineers picked the best route around the Pedregosa Mountains and the Chiricahua Mountains. And so the highway engineers, the civil engineers that followed the railroad engineers, all they did was put US 80 to parallel the existing railroad line, because why reinvent something that already works? The best grades, the best routes through that mountainous area had already been platted out. So that's what they used. This, of course, is the Geronimo Surrender Monument along Highway 80 near Apache. I call it the Geronimo phallic symbol for obvious reasons. And this was the Apache store. And this was open both for rail traffic and was also open for highway traffic. So there would have been a gas pump outside the store, and there would have been numerous gas pumps in Rodeo at the time, and all kinds of infrastructure to service motorists along the highway. From Apache, it went through the mountains, past the College Peaks, over to Douglas. So what we see here is G Avenue in Douglas. And of course, this is the Gadsden Hotel. And this, once the highway went down A Avenue, down to 10th, and then along 10th to G Avenue, and then north, and then, of course, west after it left Douglas and headed towards Bisbee. And the highway went right down through Lowell. So it came up along Old Douglas Road, which, as you know, goes between Evergreen Cemetery and Lowell School, and then came up. The traffic circle didn't exist yet, so it just intersected with Main Street, now known as Erie in Lowell, and then went west through Lowell. And this is where Highway 80 made a right turn past on the right, this is what they called the plaza in Lowell, the parking lot today. And these buildings over here are now part of the pit. This is the Women's Club and some other businesses in Lowell that are now in the pit. And Highway 80 took a right turn from the plaza, from the parking lot, and then followed up going west. And this is the Johnson Addition in the background there, and it's going towards Old Bisbee. And this is where Highway 80 went through the Johnson Addition, which is right here. And this is a remnant of Highway 80 that existed back in those days. This is this road right here, right in there. And you can see the yellow stripe to indicate it was part of the U.S. highway system. And if you look to your left as you're leaving the Lowell parking lot and headed towards Highway 80, you'll see this segment of road right at the edge of the pit. And there's a curb over here. This is the original Highway 80, what's left of it. And from the Johnson Addition, the road went through or along what was known as Naco Highway for many years. And this is the backside of Chihuahua Hill. This is Dewbaker Canyon right in here. And this picture right here is about 1940. The highway just came right into Bisbee. There was no elevated exit ramp as there is today. So I just followed in down Naco Road. And this is a parking lot across from the Bisbee Roasters over here. This was the railroad depot. These streetcar, there's a short segment of streetcar track that's still visible. It's where Dr. Toole's office was, of course. And at the other end was Dugan's mortuary, now Dr. Long's dentist's office. And then the highway went right through downtown Bisbee. You can imagine by 1940s, when a lot of people owned motor vehicles, how busy downtown Main Street was, because it was the only way to get east to Tombstone and Benson and across the country. And they allowed parking on Main Street. So it must have been pretty crowded. And here's somebody risking their life going across the street, not in a crosswalk. And then the road went up through Upper Tombstone Canyon, took a left at West Boulevard, and went up the divide. And there was highway infrastructure. On the right is the Hargis Tourist Court as it existed in the 30s. And this was the gas station right before the road takes a sharp right-hand turn to start up the divide. So this is no longer here, but several of these tourist cabins are still there, and you can see them today. This was the kind of lodging that was available in most communities, was just a little cabin with a shared restroom and a cafe nearby, probably. And this was the best that most folks could afford at the time when they were traveling across the country. And this is the road going up the divide from West Boulevard. And this is the top of the hill. There's the monument. This road was built in 1916 with prison labor. It is not the Continental Divide, although it says that right on that monument right there. It was actually the divide. So it divided Banning Creek watershed with the Mule Creek watershed. You can see Black Knob or Gold Hill there in the distance. And this was the cafe that was at the top of the divide. This is now a private residence. And this photo appeared in Arizona Highways magazine, along with a nice article about how the Continental Divide got misnamed, and Bisbee Mining Historical Museum and its docents and our director Annie got a really, really nice shout out in that magazine article, which appeared in this month's Arizona Highways magazine. Road goes north to Tombstone, and it went right down Allen Street. Now, today, the highway alignment, of course, is on Fremont Street, which is the next street to the east. But at the time, Highway 80 just went right down through the middle of downtown Tombstone. No gunfights in the middle of the street yet. They hadn't yet developed their mix of legend and history. Now, one thing that's fascinating about Highway 80, and we don't get a lot of love, but we should get a lot of love for what is now Arizona 80 and what used to be Highway 80. And this is a painting that was done in 1966 by Don Percival. It's titled "The Street Fight," not the gunfight at the OK Corral. If you look carefully in the upper left-hand part of this painting, you can see the OK Corral sign. You can also see the entrance to the OK Corral from Fremont Street, and this is the OK Corral over here. The fight took place in this vacant lot between the C.S. Fly Photo Gallery and this little house along here, and the street, what is today US 80. So there's the Earps. There's one of the McLowrys, or I think this is Billy Clanton, and this is one of the McLowrys over here, and that's another McLowry over here. Why did they call it the gunfight at the OK Corral? Because it's a whole lot sexier and easier to remember than the street fight that actually took place in the vacant lot and on Fremont Street, which is now historic Highway 80. But Highway 80 had a major, major role, obviously, in Cochise County history. Oh, and you can't charge admission to reenact a gunfight that takes place on historic Highway 80. So instead, you hold it back here. And then the road went up to through St. David and to Benson. And this is 4th Street, looking west on Highway 80. I love this postcard. Restroom, hell, I ain't tired. Where's the can? So this was something that you could buy in one of the stores, or I think it was a cafe in Benson. And of course, most of these buildings are still there. Highway 80 then went on what was known as Benson Highway, going west, past Vale, and came into Tucson from the east. And this was the biggest alignment of Benson Highway. It was 4 lanes with a median back in the early 1960s. And Benson Highway was lined with tourist courts and cafes and coffee houses or coffee shops. Today, it's pretty dilapidated condition. The road went Benson Highway down to South 6th Avenue, went through South Tucson going north, and then veered over to Stone Avenue. Stone went going north to Miracle Mile connecting with Oracle Road all the way out to Oracle Junction, then north to Florence. And this again, this stretch of 80 had its historical moments. In 1940, Tom Mix was killed, the movie actor, driving his high-powered automobile and ran off in a wash and ended up killing him. In 1926, another automobile accident just outside of Florence involving a fellow named John Bird Button Salmon, Bisbee High School class of 1921, 3-sport star athlete, who then went to the University of Arizona. Coming back from a practice football game for the U of A, the backup quarterback and student body president at the time was thrown from the vehicle. He was the only one injured. No seatbelts, no airbags, and of course was paralyzed from the neck down. And as he was laying in the hospital in Tucson, told Coach Pop McHale, tell the team to bear down. And this is where the bear down legend came from a traffic accident that happened on historic Highway 80 near Florence and involved, of course, a Bisbee boy named John Bird Button Salmon. So 80 is just lots of history on Highway 80. 80 then went north through Florence Junction, took a left turn and went through Mesa, Apache Junction, Mesa, and then Phoenix. And that's Phoenix in the early 1940s. And that's the Westward Ho Hotel right there with a big radio antenna. And then it went west, running through Gila Bend there on the left, and then Yuma crossing the Colorado River. So then it went to San Diego. So this was 80 as it went through Arizona back in the 20s, 30s, and very early 1940s. Now, John Steinbeck memorialized Route 66, the Mother Road, as the migratory route for Dust Bowl Okies and other people seeking a better way of life and jobs in California. The fact is, as many or more Okies and Dust Bowl migrants went down 80. Why was that? Because 80 was an all-weather road. Many of the cars that they were traveling in at the time did not have heaters or effective heaters. So travel on Highway 66 during the wintertime was a very, very difficult and could be even a dangerous proposition. So a lot of the migratory traffic going to California actually went down Highway 80. And these photos were both taken along Highway 80. Folks that have broken down and were just, these folks don't have a clue of what to do. Got a flat tire and probably no way to fix it. And these folks had vehicle trouble and they're just down there on the side of the road. This is desperation. This didn't get featured in a John Steinbeck book or movie, but it was reality for people on Highway 80 as well. And then in 1941, of course, and even before that, as the U.S. started developing much larger military, we start to see military bases being built all along what would become Highway 80 or near Highway 80 in southwestern New Mexico and southeastern Arizona. Demi, New Mexico became a center for bombardiers. Lordsburg became a large POW camp. Douglas Army Airfield was established just to the north and east of Douglas. Fort Huachuca, Davis Monthan Field, Marana Field, all along or close to Highway 80. And much, as a matter of fact, at times, most of the traffic that you would have seen on Highway 80 at that time would have been military convoys, or as we used to call it in the Army, motor marches. And these convoys would either be practice convoys to teach truck drivers and military officers how to successfully conduct a motor march, or they would have been actually taking people across the country. Not all military traffic moved by railroad, a lot of it moved on Highway 80. So, what you would see over there on the right is a photo showing the convoy traveling on a road that would have been very, very much like Route 6 or Highway 80 in 1942, 1945. And most civilian motor traffic was restricted during World War II. There wasn't a shortage of gasoline. We had plenty of gas in the United States. What we didn't have, because the Japanese had taken over the Dutch East Indies and Malaya, was a plentiful rubber supply. So until they figured out how to make tires out of synthetic rubber and develop rubber plantations in South America, they had to restrict civilian motor traffic. Well, they got plenty of gas, so how do you restrict? You just refuse to sell people gasoline. They ration gas. A person, an ordinary motorist, got 2 gallons of gas a week. That was the A ration for gasoline, and that's shown right here. If you had a carpool, you got more gallons of gasoline and you got a B sticker. And then if you had for essential motor traffic, and that would be doctors, emergency personnel, people like that, got a C sticker, and they got even more gallons of gas. But gasoline was strictly rationed. You might be able to get it on the black market. You might be able to get a set of tires on the black market. But the legal sale of gasoline was strictly limited, and you had to have a sticker on your windshield. And if you look at movies made in the 1940s, during World War II, you'll see the cars have usually an A sticker on the window. So Route 80, excuse me, I keep saying 66. Shame on me. Highway 80, Route 86, or Route 80 remained the principal east-west highway through southeastern Arizona and southwestern New Mexico until the 1940s. There was no way to get from, for example, Lordsburg through San Simon, through Bowie, through Wilcox to Benson on a decent road. But, and it was done deliberately. The Board of Supervisors and state representatives from Cochise County, because Bisbee and Douglas were the primary cities, very politically influential at the time, made sure that that Highway 80 remained the only route through southeastern Arizona. But military necessity changed things. So in the early 1940s, they started construction on the highway from Steens, New Mexico, Steens Pass, going west through San Simon, through Bowie, through Wilcox, and through Texas Canyon. And this is a photo showing the final construction, which went through Texas Canyon to build the road that would connect western New Mexico and southeastern Arizona on a good paved highway that was going to be designated Highway 86. And it was completed in March 1942. And this was a major blow to traffic on Highway 80 because people didn't no longer had to take that long horseshoe-shaped road that went from Road Forks to Rodeo to Douglas to Bisbee up to Benson. That was no longer necessary. From this point on, it was possible to drive just straight across northern New Mexico. This killed highway tourism for that part of the country. At least it would have if there been highway tourism in World War II, and after World War II, it was a death blow. And so this became the new principal route, Highway 86, through Cochise County instead of this. So tourism just plummeted on this road. Of course, there was still plenty of economic businesses and economic activity in Bisbee and Douglas, but this stretch of highway became motor vehicle daily traffic just plummeted. Gas stations closed, cafes closed. It was a rough blow. And then in 1958, the Arizona Department of Transportation created a new highway above Old Bisbee and built a tunnel through the Mule Pass Mountains. And this is construction in the mid 1950s, and of course, the finished tunnel today. And then in the 1950s, remember Dwight Eisenhower, the guy that was on the road march from the East Coast to the West Coast in 1919 and who saw the German Autobahn system and was one of the principal advocates for the modern U.S. interstate highway system that developed in the mid 1950s, 60s, and up to the early 70s. Highway traffic on interstates was both a good thing and a bad thing. It's a lot faster, limited access highways. So to get on and get off, you had to use a ramp, and the road was better designed. It had shallower curves. It had less in terms of dangerous places on the road, but it also meant that you couldn't just pull off on the side of the road if you saw a restaurant or a gas station. You had to get off on one of the ramps. And this is a Texaco station in southwestern New Mexico that just died after I-10 was created because there was no way to get off to get to it. And a lot of the state highway system as it developed was decertified as this highway was constructed. Interstate 10, segments of 80 were decertified. And in 1989, all of the highway was decertified. So a lot of these businesses that existed, and this was the Spanish Trail Motel coming into Tucson on Benson Highway. It was on the right side as you came in from the east. Beautiful hotel, really nice restaurant, had a great lounge and place to catch top-notch entertainment. I saw the ink spots in there in the 1970s. It's now destroyed. It was cut off by the interstate. This was a restaurant across the street from the Spanish Trail on Benson Highway that was cut off by the interstate. But in 1963, it was a place of contention because the owner was an unrepentant racist who had Confederate flags and slave manacles on the walls of his Pickwick Inn restaurant. It was picketed by the NAACP until he gave in and integrated it in 1963. So again, here's history being made on Highway 80. And Highway 80 was also a scene of brutality in Alabama. And this was Bloody Sunday, one of the marches that was scheduled by the Southern Christian leadership folks, Dr. Martin Luther King, to go across the Alabama River, the Pettus Bridge on Highway 80. And in early March, these folks started across the river with peaceful intent just to advocate for their civil rights and voting rights. And they were set upon by Alabama State Police and beaten to the ground in bloody pulp. This helped focus attention on civil rights in the United States. This happened on Highway 80. Highway 80 in 1989 was decertified in Arizona. It just became Arizona 80. And what that means is the federal government's no longer maintaining the highway. It's up to the states to do that. And New Mexico completely decertified Highway 80, except for the section. It's about 32 miles between Road Forks, New Mexico, and State Line Road just to the south and west of Rodeo. But in the 2018, advocates for historic Highway 80, which would be like Route 66 is today, got the state of Arizona to sign Highway 80 as a designated historic route. So this segment that goes through Cochise County that's highlighted in yellow, you'll see historic Highway 80 signs all the way up. The ones in Bisbee, by the way, are on the more modern section of the highway that was created in 1958 with the Mule Pass Tunnel. There's nothing that goes through downtown Bisbee or on West Boulevard, unfortunately. But this is now all of Highway 80 across Arizona from State Line Road, New Mexico, Arizona boundary, all the way to Yuma is marked Historic Highway 80. Now, can we do the same thing that the Route 66 did? And it's going to be up to us to do it. But here's the two guys that did it for Route 66. In the 1980s, after Interstate 40 came into southern or northern Arizona, and the town of Seligman was bypassed, another big horseshoe route that went from Ash Fork, New Mexico to Kingman, Arizona. Seligman was just going to dry up and blow away. These two fellas, Angel and Manny Delgadillo, decided they weren't going to Juan Delgadillo decided they weren't going to let their town dry up and blow away. They formed a Route 66 association, went to nearby towns like Kingman and Ash Fork and Williams, pitched the idea to them, let's promote highway tourism. Let's sign this as historic Route 66. The idea caught on, and it spread both to California and to all the other states. And as a consequence, because of what these two men here did, Angel and Juan Delgadillo, because of what they did, Route 66 became a booming business. Highway tourism from Santa Barbara to Chicago became an incredibly powerful business, and towns that were drying up and blowing away suddenly became prosperous again. So we're going to end with this mural that's on the wall of the Rodeo Cafe that shows Route 66 all the way from Savannah, Georgia, all the way down, including this part, of course, that we all love. Can we make Highway 66, historic highway, or excuse me, historic Highway 80? Can we make this as successful in terms of promoting highway tourism as Route 66? It's up to us. So thank you for your kind attention. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them.
Well, thank you so much, Mike. That was incredibly fascinating about a stretch of road that so many of us travel, if not on a daily basis, uh, regularly.
Yep.
And Christine said, let's get historic Highway 80 signs in Old Bisbee and Lowell to celebrate the past route. How
Yep.
about promoting that?
How about that? How about getting them over the divide too?
No kidding. That would be great, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would. Yes, it would. And it would also be cool to have interpretive signs. I don't know if they go for it in Tombstone to show them that Fremont Street, which is part of historic Highway 80, of course, is where the Earps actually shot it out with the Clantons and McLaurys during the October 26, 1881 shootout that didn't take place at the OK Corral.
And another question, how do you think Highway 80 contributed to the development of the West?
Well, it made it possible for people to move more efficiently and quickly between the eastern and western parts of the United States. So when you do that, you make goods and services cheaper. You make it possible for uh, people to travel out without a great deal of danger and discomfort. So I think all the highways that were developed made it possible for people to travel by motor car, truck, bus. It just it stimulated the economy, it stimulated traffic, it stimulated tourism. So um, vehicular traffic was instrumental in developing the western part of the United States and Arizona.
Um, Kimberly has asked, do you know what will happen with trucking when the Douglas Port of Entry is completed? Will Rodeo, New Mexico get a huge increase in trucks?
I would love to see Rodeo, New Mexico get some love, but it's hard to say how those trucks will be routed. I hope 80 doesn't get used for truck traffic. Right now, it's used for wide loads, and it's scary because that road is about the same width as it was in the 1940s. A lot of the infrastructure along 80 between Douglas and Road Forks, or Road Forks, not Road Forks, State Line Road, is the original bridges and original culverts and everything else that was out there. We don't want to see that replaced with a bigger, wider road because it detracts from um, the aesthetics of travel on the road, of being a road warrior. So I don't know. I hope they figure out a different way to do it because that would be a dangerous thing to do, my opinion, for what it's worth.
Yeah, and some of those parts, most definitely. Yeah,
Oh yeah,
most
yeah.
definitely. I've had a couple scary encounters. Um, and Christine concurred. She said, let's work on getting recognition and that everyone is enthusiastic due to your research.
Well, great. And I've been in contact with folks. I don't know if anybody saw my opinion column that was in the Arizona Daily Star last Sunday in on the opinion pages about how Route Six, how how Highway 80, um, how signing it and promoting it would increase tourism. And that tourism, road warrior tourism, is clean tourism. People that travel Route 66, for example, they're the destination is the road itself, not Chicago, not Los Angeles, but the taking part in that old road travel, and they stay a night and they move on. They're not party animals. They're not here to drink and carouse. They're here to travel the road. So if we can get more people like that into Bisbee and Douglas and Rodeo, New Mexico, our economies will benefit from it, but it won't hurt us. I think it'd be a good thing to do.
And do you have any idea of how many people utilized Highway 80 in Cochise County in its early history?
Thousands per day. As soon as the road was um, bypassed by Highway 86, traffic plummeted. Um, so into the hundreds per day. So it was a real gut blow to service stations and cafes and roadside motor courts between Road Forks, New Mexico, and Douglas in particular. But it also hurt places between Bisbee and Douglas. There were fewer travelers overall. So it went from thousands to hundreds. And that's a serious depletion in terms of daily volume of traffic.
And in your research, did you see a correlation of tourism related advertising once Highway 80 came into existence and the community?
Absolutely, absolutely. What you started seeing was in magazines all over the country. You started seeing advertisements for guest ranches and motor courts and destinations like Tucson and around the Phoenix area in particular, because those are where the dude ranches were. But also, you just started seeing more tourism being promoted. Tombstone could not have been a good tourist venue had Highway 80 not developed. And Tombstone was the first tourist venue. And then, of course, Bisbee was repurposed after the mine shut down. But that's how towns continued to survive after their principal economic engine went off the rails, whether it was silver mining or copper mining. You reinvent yourself. And in order to do that, you have to let people know you're there. Arizona Highways Magazine was a principal way of getting people out here. It started as a good roads promotion magazine, but quickly switched over to tourism when they realized what a great promotion vehicle this magazine will be for getting tourists out to Arizona. So today, that's what it is. And it morphed from promoting good roads to promoting tourism. So we saw that pretty much immediately.
Ah, well said. Who knows what would have happened to communities like Bisbee and Tombstone had we not had Highway 80?
Dry up and blow away.
I think they would have. Um, we have a couple of comments. Sharon says, fascinating to hear this history. Uh, so much that she didn't know. And Will said, great talk, and he thanks you.
Good. I
And
hope nobody wants their money back.
Me too.
And thank you for this wonderful opportunity, Annie. You know that I'm a big supporter of the Mining Historical Museum, and this is one of the vehicles that we can use to get things to people who may not be able to come to us physically, but can come to us electronically. And we love to tell this story. Um, I would say that history is honest nostalgia, and we all yearn for the good old days. But what we want to do, as far as Bisbee is concerned, is tell a straight story. And the Mining Historical Museum tells a straight story.
Well, thank you so much, Mike. You and your lovely bride, Judy, support our organization in a myriad of ways, and we appreciate you.
So everybody out there that has watched this talk, if you like what you see, make sure that you attend the other talks, and don't be shy about donating to the Bisbee Mining and Historical Museum, because the money that you would give us to promote what we do will be well spent, and it's tax deductible.
Thank you so much, Mike, and I concur. I concur. Well, I'd like to thank our audience for joining us today. And again, thank you, Mike. And I look forward. I think our next talk we have, I don't have the date on the top of my head, but I know it's in August. We'll be talking about the Calumet and Arizona Mining Company in Bisbee.
Okay. Adios.
All right. Thank you all for joining us today. Have a great Saturday. Bye.